Welcome to The Explainer. Now, when you think about the 2008 financial crisis, your mind probably jumps to risky trades, maybe the housing market bubble. But what if one of the biggest problems was actually hiding in plain sight, tucked away in the accounting rules themselves? Today, we're going to look at the quiet revolution that completely changed how banks prepare for the future.
Okay, let's dive right in. The story really kicks off with an event we all remember, the 2008 financial crisis. And yeah, most of the blame, it went to complex financial products and these wild bets on housing. But it turns out there was another culprit lurking in the background.
And here's the crazy part. What if I told you that a huge weakness that fueled that whole crisis wasn't just about Wall Street traders, but was actually hidden in the way banks were required to do their books? It was a fundamental flaw right at the core of how they accounted for losses.
So that gets us to the heart of the issue that regulators zeroed in on. The whole system was fundamentally backward-looking. The old rules literally forced banks to wait until a disaster was already happening before they could even start building up their defenses. See, under the old incurred loss model, banks could only set aside money for a loan that might go bad after there was hard proof a loss had already occurred. It was kind of like trying to drive a car by only looking in the rearview mirror. The new system, this expected credit loss or ECL model, well, it flips that idea on its head. It's all about being proactive, forcing banks to look at the road ahead.
And you don't have to take my word for it. The banking regulators themselves put it perfectly. The old way of recognizing these losses was, and I'm quoting here, too little, too late. By the time the rules allowed a bank to officially acknowledge a problem, it was often already a full-blown catastrophe.
So in response, global leaders basically said, never again. And that led to this major overhaul, a new forward-looking framework called the Expected Credit Loss Model, or ECL. This was a direct attempt to give banks, and really the whole financial system, a much better way to see what's coming.
So what is it exactly? Well, to put it simply, instead of waiting for the crash, ECL requires banks to build a kind of financial crystal ball. They have to estimate future potential loan losses by looking at everything: past data, current economic conditions, and even big picture forecasts, like how a jump in unemployment might affect all the mortgages on their books.
And this is how it actually gets built. You can think of it as a three-step dance. First, you analyze the past, looking at historical data. Then, you assess the present, what's happening right now with your portfolio. And finally, you have to forecast the future, using economic models to predict what might happen next. It's this combination of past, present, and future that gives a much more complete picture of the actual risk.
But a powerful tool like this, you can't just hand it over without a serious instruction manual. For banks, that manual comes in the form of 11 core principles from regulators, which lay out exactly how this new forecasting system has to be managed.
Now, we are not going to go through all 11, don't worry. But they really boil down to three absolutely crucial areas of responsibility for every single bank: having strong governance, using sound methods, and being transparent with the public.
First up is governance. And this is simple. The buck stops at the top, with the board and with senior management. They are the ones who are ultimately responsible for making sure the bank's risk systems and internal controls are up to the task.
Second, the methods themselves have to be rock solid. This covers everything from properly documenting how you measure risk to how you group similar loans together. And here's a key part. It requires experienced credit judgment. That means these systems aren't just on autopilot. They need smart people constantly overseeing and validating the models to make sure they're accurate.
And finally, transparency is totally non-negotiable. Banks can't just come up with a number and call it a day. They have to publicly explain how they're calculating these future risks, what major assumptions they're making, and why their estimates might go up or down over time.
Okay, so you have banks with these crystal balls trying to predict the future. But who makes sure they're actually using them correctly? Who's checking their work and making sure they're not just seeing what they want to see? Well, that's where the supervisors come in. That's the job of the banking supervisors. The easiest way to think of them is as the inspectors who check the forecasters. They're making sure this whole system works, not just to keep the bank safe, but to keep the entire economy stable.
So their job is to show up periodically and evaluate everything. From the bank's internal controls to its forecasting models, they're there to ask the hard questions. Are these methods solid? Are the forecasts reasonable? And at the end of the day, does this bank have enough capital set aside to actually weather a storm?
All right, so let's bring all this home. why on earth does a change to an accounting rule actually matter to you? I mean, this isn't just some academic exercise. It's about the stability of the entire financial system that we all rely on.
And here's the most crucial point. Shifting from a reactive system to a proactive one forces banks to build up their financial cushions before the storm hits, not while they're in the middle of it. It's about recognizing that risk builds up slowly over time and having the discipline to deal with it head-on.
The end goal here is pretty clear. You get a much more resilient banking system that can actually withstand economic shocks. That means better risk management inside the banks themselves, which in turn creates more stability for all of us and hopefully means we'll see fewer taxpayer-funded bailouts in the future.
So it really is a fundamental improvement. It's like swapping out that rearview mirror for a crystal ball. But here's the thing. This new system is only as good as the forecasts it's built on. And as the rules themselves admit, those forecasts involve a very high degree of human judgment, which leaves us with a huge critical question for the future of finance. Will their forecasts be right next time?